Now, let's talk about this. I'm on the edge of my seat for this next one, Cyrus. This whole conversation about people living with insulin resistance and this concept affecting all forms of diabetes.
For sure. Okay. This is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So traditionally speaking, insulin resistance is only really talked about in the context of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. If you look online, if you go talk to any endocrinologist, if you talk to any internal medicine doctor and you bring up the word insulin resistance, the first thing that'll pop into their head is prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And the reason for that is simple. Insulin resistance causes prediabetes. Prediabetes turns into type 2 diabetes over the course of time. So it's a linear progression. You start with insulin resistance, you become pre-diabetic becomes type 2, and it has to go in that sequence. At all points along this process, it is actually possible to move backwards towards less insulin resistance and more insulin sensitivity. And by doing that, you can actually decrease your risk and actually prevent prediabetes and type 2 diabetes from even starting in the first place. Okay? So we've known this, scientists have known this for over 100 years, that insulin resistance is a required prerequisite in order to develop prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And that's very well accepted. But what scientists also have discovered over time, which the medical community is now playing catch up to, and the general population is now playing catch up to, is the fact that insulin resistance is also present in many, many, many other situations. Number one, it is present in non-diabetic individuals. Insulin resistance is present in non-diabetic individuals and a very high number of non-diabetic individuals. And we know this to be true because there are studies that actually show that insulin resistance is detectable 5 to 10 years before prediabetes becomes detectable. So like I said earlier, insulin resistance is a required prerequisite to become pre-diabetic. The question is, do you develop insulin resistance today and prediabetes tomorrow? The answer is no. It takes years to develop. And so if you can measure and actually detect insulin resistance now in your blood using very specific tests, then you can prevent the development of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes altogether. So it's very important to understand that, because a lot of people listen to this conversation about insulin resistance and the first thing they do is they go, oh, well, I don't have diabetes. I'm fine. I don't have diabetes. I exercise. Come on. I'm a normal weight. I don't have diabetes. Like I don't need to worry about that. I can eat whatever I want, right? And the truth
my A1C is perfect. I have a good A1C. I got it tested.
Exactly right. My blood glucose is flat. My fasting blood glucose is a 94. I don't have diabetes. I don't need to worry about insulin resistance, okay? The answer is not true, okay? Secondarily, people living with autoimmune diabetes, you, me, people living with type 1.5 diabetes, which is adult onset, slow progressing autoimmune diabetes, okay? This is a very large population. There are some people who believe, some researchers who have postulated that type 1.5 diabetes is actually a larger number of people around the planet than type 1 diabetes. And that is that people, again, are developing autoimmune versions of diabetes later in life beyond the age of 30. So we'll pool all of this collection of people together, type 1 and type 1.5. We're talking potentially over, I'd say 50 to 100 million people around the planet. And these people also are susceptible to living to experiencing insulin resistance. And the way that you do it is simply by adopting a low carbohydrate and or high fat diet. Okay, so how does this work? I said earlier, you can develop insulin resistance first, and then that can set into motion the dominoes leading towards prediabetes and type 2. So insulin resistance is the first domino, then comes prediabetes, then comes type 2 diabetes. In this situation, most people end up developing autoimmune diabetes through some type of environmental collection of problems, either resulting from something, a virus that comes from the environment, or from specific antigens found in your food. But the idea is that you get type 1 diabetes occurs over the course of time. And then as soon as you switch over to a low carbohydrate diet, because again, you've been thinking for the longest time, oh, carbohydrates are bad for me. I'm not going to eat carbohydrates. So you start eating more fat-rich foods. You adopt a low carbohydrate diet, a paleo diet, or a ketogenic diet. As soon as you do that, then you actually induce insulin resistance from your mouth. So autoimmunity is first. Insulin resistance is second because of a diet that's high in fat and especially high in saturated fat. And then as a result of that, you end up with this condition called double diabetes. Double diabetes equals autoimmunity plus insulin resistance that occurs from your diet. And when you're living with autoimmunity plus insulin resistance, I will give you a giant good luck controlling your glucose. Good luck. It is very hard to do. It is extremely hard to do. That's what happened to me when I first adopted a low carbohydrate diet in the first year of living with type 1 diabetes. I was following this methodology and I thought it was going to make my blood glucose more controllable, but it became very hard to do. The only way that you can actually control your blood glucose when living with a high degree of insulin sensitivity as somebody with autoimmune diabetes is to dramatically reduce your total carbohydrate intake and to eat something like 30, 40 grams of carbohydrate per day maximum. If you eat anything more than that, your glucose will go all over the place and it'll make your life extremely challenging.
Okay, this is such an important conversation that you're bringing up here, and there's a lot of nuances there. And I want to go into it just a little bit more because I want you to talk a little bit about this concept of glucose intolerance, okay? Like, what is the relationship between insulin resistance and glucose intolerance, and what is happening in the people who are choosing to basically eat themselves into that state?
Yeah, okay, so this is a really good question, actually, because in the world of, there's a lot of low carbohydrate diet advocates that will tell you that glucose intolerance and insulin resistance are different things altogether, and that they're not one and the same, and that you can be glucose intolerant but insulin sensitive at the same time. And when I first heard this, I thought to myself, like, don't think that's right, but let me do a little bit of reading and a little bit of digging into the research. And what I came across is actually very, very important here, which is that it is not possible to be glucose intolerant and insulin sensitive at the same time. Now, the reason for that is very simple, actually. I want you to think of glucose metabolism as having basically two fundamental aspects to it. The first aspect of glucose metabolism is what happens to glucose and insulin in the fasting state. Okay? When you have fasted for something like 12 to 16 to 18 hours, what is your glucose and insulin doing? That's called fasting glucose metabolism. Then the second aspect of glucose metabolism is called postprandial or post-meal glucose metabolism. So that is, what is glucose and insulin doing after you eat a meal? Okay. And in order to understand how insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity is affecting you, you cannot measure only one of those. You have to measure both of them and take both of them into account. Otherwise, you're missing the bigger picture. So in the world of low carbohydrate diets, what you will find all over the place is that people get exceptionally good fasting insulin sensitivity. And the reason we know that is because you eat a low carbohydrate diet and your glucose levels fall. So you wake up in the morning with a very good fasting glucose, and your insulin levels fall. So you have low fasting insulin, low fasting glucose, and you think to yourself, well, hey, that's a good thing. So that means that you're actually insulin sensitive in the fasting state. The problem is that the minute that a low carbohydrate dieter attempts to eat carbohydrate rich food, then most of the time in the postprandial state, 1 to 2 hours after a meal, their blood glucose will be extremely high and their insulin requirements will also be extremely high. So in the fasting state, they are quote unquote insulin sensitive, but in the postprandial state, they're actually insulin resistant. And so this idea that glucose tolerance and insulin resistance are actually different is just it's just a semantic argument. It's just sort of like, let me call it one thing, but not another thing. And it's only applicable here, but not applicable there. But the idea is actually very simple. If you're glucose intolerant, you're glucose intolerant, period, end of story. Glucose intolerant and insulin resistance are one and the same. Now, in a low carbohydrate setting, like I said, fasting glucose and insulin are down, but postprandial glucose and insulin are up. And as a result of that, now you're in a situation where the only way to keep your postprandial blood glucose and insulin down is to do what? It's to reduce your carbohydrate intake. That's the only way to keep it down. So that's why low carbohydrate dieters eat a low carbohydrate diet, because they know without question that the minute they eat carbohydrate rich foods, their glucose and insulin requirements go up. And so they say to themselves, well, that doesn't work. Let me keep it down. And now fasting and postprandial are both good, but it has to be very low carbohydrate in order to get that effect.